Welcome back. How long have you been watching my channel? Let me know below.
Picture this as I gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled hands while snowflakes swirled relentlessly across my windshield, transforming the once familiar rural road leading to my parents' modest two-story home in Springfield, Illinois, into a disorienting white haze that mirrored the churning anxiety deep in my gut, because announcing my unexpected pregnancy to a family steeped in conservative values, where every holiday gathering revolved around church hymns, potluck casseroles, and unspoken rules about marriage preceding motherhood, was bound to ignite a firestorm far more intense than the biting winter chill seeping through the car's vents. Especially since the father of this child was nothing more than a fleeting encounter with a charming stranger at a dimly lit Chicago bar 3 months earlier, right after my messy divorce had left me nursing wounds with glasses of tart Merlot that blurred the edges of my loneliness. At 38 years old, having carved out a stable existence as a freelance graphic designer in the bustling city, where I crafted vibrant logos for small businesses and navigated the solitude of my high-rise apartment with late-night sketches and takeout Thai food, returning to this Midwestern suburb for Christmas felt like voluntarily stepping back into a pressure cooker of judgment and faded expectations. The kind my mother Margaret had been simmering since my rebellious teenage years when I'd first dyed my hair purple and dreamed of escaping the Sunday school sermons that dictated every aspect of a woman's proper path, and now, with 30 weeks of pregnancy causing subtle kicks against my ribcage like insistent reminders of the life growing within me, I couldn't ignore the irony blaring from the car radio's holiday playlist, some overly sentimental ballad about silent nights and holy joys that clashed violently with the secret envelope tucked securely in my glove compartment, its contents a potential detonator for family secrets I'd only recently unearthed through a combination of curiosity and quiet vengeance. The engine's hum provided a rhythmic backdrop as I replayed the decision to come home at all, weighing the faint hope of reconciliation against the certainty of confrontation. Remembering how last Christmas I'd skipped the trip entirely under the guise of a work deadline, only to receive passive-aggressive cards from relatives hinting at my selfish choices, but this year, buoyed by the unexpected thrill of impending motherhood despite the circumstances, I craved some semblance of normalcy. Even if it meant facing the woman who'd once locked me out of the house at 16 for sneaking out to a concert, her voice echoing through the night with proclamations about ruining the family reputation that she guarded fiercer than her prized rose garden. Finally, the house came into view through the flurry, its outline framed by strings of multicolored lights that twinkled against the accumulating snow on the roof, a facade of warmth that belied the emotional frost I'd always associated with these visits, and as I maneuvered the car into the driveway, tires crunching over the thin layer of ice, I grabbed the innocuous gift bag from the passenger seat, containing a delicate snow globe I'd impulsively purchased at a holiday market, its swirling particles now seeming prophetic of the turmoil I was about to unleash, before stepping out into the frigid air that nipped at my exposed skin and hurried up the shoveled path, where the front door burst open to reveal my brother Tom, his broad frame filling the threshold as he enveloped me in a bear hug that carried the faint scent of his aftershave mixed with the roasting turkey wafting from inside. Tom, ever the golden child at 42, with his steady job at the local bank, his picture-perfect wife Lisa, and their 2 rambunctious children who embodied the suburban dream my parents had always idealized, pulled back with a grin that crinkled the corners of his eyes, asking about the drive in that casual tone that masked his own underlying resentments toward my city life, while Lisa appeared behind him, her kind face etched with the subtle fatigue of managing holiday chaos, offering a quick embrace and a sympathetic glance that suggested she sensed the undercurrents I'd brought with me, as if my slightly rounded silhouette under the loose winter coat hadn't yet betrayed the truth, but her intuition had already picked up on the shift. Crossing the threshold plunged me into the enveloping warmth of the living room, where the air hummed with the crackle of the fireplace and the spicy aroma of cinnamon-scented candles flickering on the mantel, alongside an array of family photos chronicling curated moments of happiness, me as a gap-toothed kid in an Easter dress, Tom hoisting a fishing trophy, all of us posed stiffly at church events. That painted a narrative far removed from the private arguments I'd overheard growing up. Those late-night exchanges between my parents that hinted at buried grievances without ever surfacing fully. My mother, Margaret, emerged from the kitchen, her movements efficient and precise as always, wiping her hands on a floral apron tied over her sensible sweater, and she leaned in for the obligatory peck on my cheek. Her perfume a cloying floral note that transported me instantly to childhood scoldings, before commenting with feigned lightness on how the drive must have been treacherous and how I'd filled out a bit since summer, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly in assessment, prompting me to deflect with a light-hearted remark about the perils of holiday baking and the irresistible pull of pumpkin pie that had me sampling more than my share back in the city. My father, Robert, remained ensconced in his worn leather recliner by the hearth, the newspaper rustling in his lap as he offered a grunted greeting without lifting his gaze, his perpetual detachment a shield against emotional tempests that had defined our family dynamics for decades, preferring the solace of sports scores and editorials to the messy realities of his children's lives. And as we all settled onto the plaid sofa with steaming mugs of hot cocoa that Lisa had thoughtfully prepared, spiked with a discreet splash of rum for the adults, a small act of rebellion that brought a conspiratorial smile to my lips, I absorbed the scene, the children chattering animatedly about their letters to Santa and the toys they hoped would appear under the tree come morning, while Tom launched into his ritualistic recounting of the year's triumphs, from closing a major loan deal to coaching his son's soccer team to victory. Each anecdote drawing approving nods from our parents that underscored the invisible hierarchy where his conformity earned endless praise. The conversation meandered through safe territories like neighborhood updates and complaints about rising grocery prices, but beneath the surface, I felt the tension coiling like a spring, especially when my mother steered the talk toward my career, probing with veiled concern about whether the freelance instability in Chicago was sustainable at my age. Her words laced with the implication that I should have followed Tom's path of security and tradition, which only fueled my resolve to drop the pregnancy news amid the festivities, though I held back for now, content to let the anticipation build as we migrated toward the dining room at her directive, to assist with setting the table. In the midst of unfolding linens and arranging silverware, a hushed argument filtered from the hallway, my parents' voices low but urgent, fragments catching my ear about avoiding old mistakes during this special time and the importance of keeping certain matters buried to preserve the holiday spirit. Their tones threaded with a desperation that resonated with the vague memories of similar discord from my adolescence, when I'd lie awake piecing together whispers about financial woes or unspoken regrets that never fully materialized into explanations. Pausing with a plate in hand, the gift bag heavy at my side, my heart raced with a mix of curiosity and calculated opportunity, recognizing that their hidden fractures could mirror my own impending revelation. And just as I edged closer to eavesdrop further, Tom appeared at my elbow, clapping a hand on my shoulder with brotherly insistence to hurry along before dinner grew cold. His interruption pulling me back into the fold while the snippet of their quarrel lingered like a shadow, igniting a spark of mischief within me because if they harbored secrets worth concealing, perhaps it was high time I illuminated a few of my own, starting with the life stirring inside me and the envelope that could shatter their illusions forever. As we transitioned from the living room's cozy glow into the dining area where the long oak table stood adorned with crisp white linens, gleaming silver candelabras holding tapered beeswax candles that flickered softly in the draft from the opening door, and an array of holiday dishes steaming invitingly from the kitchen counter, mashed potatoes whipped to creamy perfection, green bean casserole topped with crispy fried onions straight from the family recipe book passed down from Grandma Evelyn, and the inevitable cranberry sauce molded from a can that always wobbled unsettlingly on the plate like a gelatinous reminder of traditions too rigid to evolve. I couldn't shake the lingering fragments of my parents' hallway argument that had snagged in my mind like burrs on a wool sweater. Those hushed references to old mistakes and buried consequences, stirring up a cocktail of nostalgia and suspicion that made the festive atmosphere feel more like a thinly veiled performance than genuine. Celebration, especially as I helped Lisa arrange the side dishes while the children darted around our legs, their laughter providing a momentary shield against the undercurrents swirling among the adults. Tom, ever the dutiful son, took charge of carving the massive turkey that Mom had bragged about brining overnight with a secret blend of herbs and apple cider vinegar. His knife slicing through the golden skin with practiced ease as he passed generous portions onto plates, initiating a flow of conversation that danced around the edges of deeper topics. Starting with innocuous complaints about the relentless snow forecast for Christmas morning that could derail the neighborhood caroling event organized by the church ladies, then veering into updates on mutual acquaintances like our old high school teacher Mr. Hargrove, who'd retired to Florida only to return complaining about the humidity. All of it serving as a buffer that allowed me to observe the dynamics at play without immediate pressure, though my mother's pointed glances toward my untouched wine glass, substituted with sparkling water at my insistence, hinted at her growing unease with my subdued demeanor. Settling into my assigned seat across from Tom, the one with the slightly wobbly leg that Dad had promised to fix for years, but never got around to, I savored the first bite of the meal, the savory juices mingling with the buttery rolls warm from the oven. And as the group fell into a rhythm of passing platters and clinking silverware, I found myself engaging in an awkward, yet familiar banter with my brother, reminiscing about our childhood escapades like the time we built a fort in the backyard using old Christmas boxes and convinced the neighbor's dog to guard it, his chuckles deep and genuine while he prodded me about city life, asking if the skyscrapers still made me feel as small as they did on my first visit. To which I replied with a wry smile that at least the anonymity there let me breathe without the constant scrutiny of small-town eyes, a subtle nod to the freedoms I'd claimed since leaving at 22 for art school, where the structured world of Springfield's expectations had begun to suffocate my creative spirit. Midway through the main course, with the children's chatter fading as they focused on demolishing their portions amid Mom's reminders to use napkins properly, the talk inevitably circled back to personal milestones. Tom dominating with animated tales of his recent promotion at the bank that involved overseeing a new mortgage program for first-time homebuyers, painting it as a noble pursuit that aligned perfectly with the values of stability and community our parents had instilled, earning nods of approval from Dad, who finally set aside his fork to murmur something about hard work paying off, while Mom beamed with that maternal pride reserved solely for achievements that fit her blueprint of success, her eyes sparkling as she turned to me with a question laced in honeyed concern about whether my freelance graphic design gigs were providing enough security in these uncertain economic times. Her implication clear that at 38 I should be emulating Tom's path rather than chasing artistic whims in a metropolis known for its fleeting opportunities. The dig landed like a gentle prod at first, but it escalated when she followed up by sighing about how some women in her book club were already grandmothers, their daughters having settled down young with husbands from solid families. The comparison hanging in the air heavy as the scent of sage stuffing, prompting a flashback to my own divorce 2 years prior, when the ink on the papers was still fresh and I'd driven home unannounced only to find her sorting through my belongings as if preparing for a funeral, her lectures on choosing poorly and wasting her chances echoing in the guest room where I'd crashed for a week, emerging hollow-eyed, but determined to rebuild without their input, a resolve that now fueled my decision to hint at the pregnancy during a lull in the conversation. Seizing the moment as Lisa cleared a plate and the kids begged for seconds of the sweet potatoes glazed with marshmallows, I casually mentioned how my latest project involved designing promotional materials for a local women's health center specializing in prenatal care, the words slipping out with feigned nonchalance that masked the thrill of the partial reveal. Watching Tom's fork hover midair as he processed the implication, his face flushing slightly because he knew from our sporadic phone calls about my dating dry spell post-divorce, while Mom's expression tightened into a mask of polite confusion that barely concealed her disapproval. Her quick pivot to praising the meal's simplicity as a virtue in these extravagant times feeling like a deflection straight from her well-worn playbook of avoidance. The exchange lightened briefly when I quipped back about how even bank managers could use a Lesson in work-life balance after hearing about Tom's overtime marathons. A witty jab that exposed his not-so-secret stress-eating habit of late-night donuts that Lisa had vented about during our last girls' weekend. Drawing a surprised laugh from her and a mock glare from him that diffused the tension just enough to carry us toward dessert. But as the group migrated to the kitchen where pies awaited on the wire rack, apple lattice oozing cinnamon filling and pumpkin smooth as silk cream, I excused myself to freshen up, climbing the creaky stairs to the bathroom with the house's familiar groans accompanying each step, the walls lined with those same framed photos that chronicled our idealized past, yet one image from the early 80s, predating my birth, caught my eye anew, showing Mom in a flowing sundress at what looked like a summer fair, her arm linked with Dad's, but her gaze distant, almost wistful, a detail that now screamed unspoken stories amid the attic door's slight ajar position at the hallway's end. Unable to resist the pull of curiosity amplified by the evening's undercurrents, I nudged the door open with my shoulder, the hinges whispering in protest as my phone's flashlight pierced the dusty gloom, illuminating stacks of labeled boxes filled with out-of-season ornaments, yellowed photo albums, and forgotten keepsakes, until my beam landed on a small wooden chest in the far corner, its surface etched with unfamiliar initials that sent a shiver down my spine unrelated to the chill seeping from the uninsulated space, the lid slightly warped as if rarely disturbed, promising revelations that could either bolster my resolve or complicate the announcement I'd been steeling myself to make fully downstairs. Heart pounding with a mix of trepidation and exhilaration, I reached out tentatively, fingers brushing the cool wood just as footsteps echoed from below, Mom's voice calling up to inquire if everything was all right and to hurry for pie before it cooled, forcing me to retreat hastily, pocketing the spark of discovery that now intertwined with my pregnancy secret, because as I descended the stairs rejoining the group amid the clatter of dessert plates, the decision crystallized in my mind to lay everything bare during the gift exchange that followed, the mysterious chest upstairs lingering as a potential ally in the confrontation ahead, leaving me poised on the edge of unleashing truths that could redefine this holiday and our family irrevocably. With the dessert plates cleared away and the lingering sweetness of apple pie still coating the air in the dining room where crumbs dotted the tablecloth like scattered confetti from a party that had taken a somber turn, the natural progression toward the gift exchange drew us all back to the living room, the Christmas tree standing sentinel in the corner with its boughs heavy under ornaments collected over decades, hand-painted glass balls from my childhood, heirloom angels with tattered wings, and the star-topper Dad had climbed the ladder to install just yesterday, casting a multicolored glow across the faces gathered on the sofa and armchairs, everyone clutching wrapped packages that promised moments of delight amid the meal's earlier undercurrents. Though my own gift bag felt heavier now with the dual weight of the snow globe and the envelope inside, its contents a calculated counterpunch to whatever judgments might fly my way. Lisa orchestrated the unwrapping with the kids' eager help, starting with small trinkets for them like puzzle sets and stuffed animals that elicited squeals of joy, while Tom presented Mom with a spa voucher for the local salon, earning her effusive thanks that highlighted how thoughtful he always was, the praise flowing as predictably as the eggnog being poured into mugs, and as the turn circled toward me, I felt the room's attention shift subtly, Dad's eyes finally lifting from his empty plate to watch with mild curiosity the fireplace, crackling in rhythm with my accelerating pulse that thrummed against the subtle swell of my belly hidden beneath layers of sweater and coat. Seizing the lull after Lisa's gift of a new scarf for me, soft wool and deep burgundy, that she claimed matched my adventurous spirit, I set the bag down gently on the coffee table amid the shreds of wrapping paper, the red-wrapped box peeking out like a forbidden fruit, and with a steadying breath that drew in the pine-scented air, I announced it outright, telling them all that I was pregnant, 30 weeks along with a baby due in early spring, no partner to speak of, but a heart full of anticipation for this new chapter that had surprised me as much as it would them. The words landing in the hushed space with the impact of a dropped ornament shattering on the hardwood floor, Lisa's hand flying to her mouth in supportive shock while Tom leaned forward with wide eyes, blurting a congratulations that hung awkwardly as the children tilted their heads in confusion, asking if Aunt Emily was getting a puppy instead. Mom's reaction shattered the fragile cheer faster than any fragile heirloom, her face draining of color before flushing crimson as she rose halfway from her seat, voice booming through the room with unfiltered outrage that I was an utter embarrassment to the family legacy she'd nurtured through years of bake sales and PTA meetings. That at my age this unwed pregnancy smacked of irresponsibility straight out of those cautionary tales she read in women's magazines, culminating in her sharp declaration that I was dead to her, the phrase slicing through the holiday warmth like a winter gale, prompting the kids to cover their ears while Dad shifted uncomfortably in his chair, muttering something incoherent about giving it time, his passivity as infuriating as her venom. The outburst triggered a cascade of memories in my mind, flashing back to my wedding day 5 years earlier when she'd whispered doubts about my choice of groom even as she adjusted my veil. Or the night of my divorce announcement when she'd suggested I move back home to regroup under her roof, implying my independence was the root of all failures. Experiences that had hardened my resolve over lonely evenings in Chicago sketching designs that paid the bills, but never filled the emotional void. And now facing this rejection anew, I chose calm over chaos, rising slowly without a tremor in my voice to say that if death was the verdict, perhaps this gift would resurrect some truths worth examining, placing the box squarely in the center of the table where it sat like a sentinel amid the discarded ribbons. In that suspended moment, as Mom's chest heaved with barely contained fury and Tom's attempts at mediation faltered into stunned silence, I slipped in a subtle revenge by turning to him with a knowing smile and mentioning offhand how proud I was of his handling of that recent work stress, the kind that involved late nights at the casino with colleagues rather than the bank. A veiled reference to the poker debts he'd confided in me months ago during a vulnerable call, watching his face blanch as Lisa shot him a questioning glance that sowed immediate doubt, shifting some of the spotlight from my news to his hidden flaws in a move that felt cleverly satisfying without outright cruelty. Without waiting for the fallout to fully erupt, I shrugged into my coat, the fabric whispering against the charged air, and headed for the door, pausing only to blow a kiss to the wide-eyed children who looked torn between the drama and their half-eaten cookies. My footsteps measured on the path as snow continued to fall in thick, muffling flakes that softened the world beyond the porch light, the cold enveloping me like an old friend while I crunched toward my car, engine roaring to life with a defiant purr that drowned out the muffled voices rising behind the frosted windows. Glancing back through the rearview as I reversed down the driveway, I caught sight of Mom snatching the box with jerky motions, her fingers fumbling the ribbon in haste, and just as the tires gripped the slick road leading away from the house, a piercing scream rent the night. Raw and horrified, carrying on the wind straight to my ears like an arrow finding its mark, freezing my breath in my lungs because it wasn't mere anger, but a visceral unraveling, the kind that suggested the envelope's DNA. Revelations, proving her long-ago affair and my true parentage, had struck at the core of her carefully constructed life, leaving me to accelerate into the storm with a whirlwind of second thoughts swirling. Had my poised exit and pointed truths bridged the gap or widened it into an abyss from which no holiday miracle could return? The scream trailed after me like a spectral echo as I navigated the snow-slicked roads away from the house, my car's headlights carving narrow tunnels through the relentless flurry that blanketed Springfield's quiet suburbs in a deceptive hush, the wipers rhythmically sweeping away the accumulation while my mind replayed the dinner's explosive climax in vivid fragments, from Mom's venomous words cutting deeper than any holiday carving knife to the deliberate placement of that red-wrapped box containing the DNA test results I'd obtained through a discreet online service after piecing together clues from an old letter discovered in Grandma Evelyn's belongings during a spring cleaning visit last April. A document that detailed Mom's youthful indiscretion with a traveling salesman passing through town in the late 70s. An affair that explained the mismatched features in family photos I'd always dismissed as genetic quirks until curiosity led me to swab my cheek and mail it off. The Results arriving like a thunderclap 2 weeks ago and prompting this vengeful orchestration amid the Christmas cheer. Pulling into the dimly lit lot of a 24-hour gas station on the outskirts, the neon sign buzzing faintly overhead as pumps stood sentinel under a canopy dripping with icicles, I killed the engine and leaned back against the seat, the baby's gentle kicks providing a rhythmic counterpoint to the turmoil churning inside, a reminder that this child deserved better than the fractured legacy I'd just hurled back at my family, yet the satisfaction of witnessing Mom's facade crack, even from afar through the rearview, carried a petty thrill that bordered on what some might call vindictive, the kind of choice that would have friends back in Chicago raising eyebrows over coffee, questioning if my calm exit masked a deeper cruelty born from years of accumulated slights. Flashbacks flooded and unbidden as steam fogged the windows, transporting me to my early childhood in that very house, where Sunday mornings meant starched dresses and Bible study groups that Mom led with iron-fisted devotion. Her emphasis on purity and propriety a stark contrast to the whispered rumors I'd overheard from neighborhood kids about her own rushed wedding to Dad at 19. A union that produced Tom 2 years later, but left gaps in the timeline she'd gloss over with tales of young love triumphing over adversity, gaps that now loomed large in light of the test's confirmation that I, born 4 years after Tom, carried DNA from a stranger rather than the man who'd raised me with gruff affection through Little League games and fishing trips, a revelation that implicated Dad in a web of silent complicity, since he'd likely known the truth all along, choosing stability over scandal in an era when divorce carried more stigma than an out-of-wedlock child. The cold seeped in despite the heater's hum, prompting me to wrap my coat tighter and check my phone for messages, finding a string from Lisa expressing concern and confusion about the abrupt departure, her texts hinting that the box's partial unveiling had already sown discord inside, with Mom rifling through the envelope's contents in hushed tones while Dad retreated to his study, door clicking shut like a vault sealing away decades of pretense, and in that moment of digital voyeurism, I allowed myself a light chuckle at the irony, thinking how my anonymous email to their gossipy neighbor Mrs. Ellis earlier that week, tipping her off about Dad's forgotten traffic violations from the 80s tied to late-night drives that might link to the affair, had set the stage for additional ripples, a subtle revenge that felt cleverly underhanded without direct confrontation, like slipping a whoopee cushion under the solemnity of their holiday routine to expose the hypocrisies bubbling beneath. Doubt crept in as the station's fluorescent lights cast long shadows across the dashboard, making me question the wisdom of weaponizing family secrets on a night meant for reconciliation, especially with the pregnancy hormones amplifying every emotional spike into a potential regret, because while Mom's rejection had justified the payback in my heated mind, dragging Dad's quiet endurance into the fray and potentially shattering Tom's illusion of our unbreakable unit might prove more destructive than healing, leaving me torn between flooring the accelerator toward Chicago's anonymity and circling back to gauge the damage, the dilemma weighing heavier than the snow piling on the wipers. Just as I shifted into drive, my phone vibrated with an incoming call from an unknown number, the screen glowing in the dim interior as I answered hesitantly, only to hear Tom's voice on the line, strained and urgent as he described the scene unfolding back at the house, Mom pacing the living room with the papers clutched like damning evidence, while Dad's muffled protests leaked from behind his study door, admitting fragments of knowledge about the past that twisted the narrative further, suggesting he'd confronted Mom years ago but chosen forgiveness for the family's sake, a confession that had Tom reeling and demanding I return to explain myself. The call's intensity peaked when background noise erupted, a second scream from Mom, sharper and laced with accusations that carried through the speaker, her voice breaking on questions about betrayal and hidden lives that mirrored the very judgments she'd leveled at me, pulling me deeper into the vortex because this unknown layer of Dad's involvement hinted at complicity I'd never anticipated, forcing a reevaluation of loyalties that had me idling at the lot's edge, the road ahead blurring not just from weather but from the haze of what-ifs. Should I drive back into the fray to claim my revenge fully, or let the truths I'd unleashed ferment into irreversible change? The line going dead amid the chaos, leaving me suspended in uncertainty as fresh snow veiled the windshield once more. The abrupt silence on the phone line after Mom's second scream felt like a slammed door echoing through the confined space of my car, where the heater's warm blast did little to thaw the ice forming in my veins as I sat idling in the gas station lot. The dashboard clock ticking past midnight while snow continued its indifferent descent outside, blanketing the world in a purity that mocked the tangled mess I'd created back at the house, forcing me to confront the full weight of my actions in that suspended moment of quiet, because turning back now meant diving headfirst into the revelations I'd engineered. Yet fleeing to Chicago offered only temporary escape from the family fractures that the DNA test had pried open like a crowbar on a rusty lock. Its results not just proving my biological disconnection from Dad, but exposing Mom's affair as the foundational lie upon which their 35-year marriage had teetered, a secret I'd uncovered through that faded letter from Grandma Evelyn, tucked in her attic trunk, detailing how Mom had sought solace with a fleeting salesman during a lonely summer before Dad stepped in as the respectable cover, a narrative that now positioned my pregnancy as an ironic mirror to her past indiscretions. Gripping the wheel with renewed determination laced with a flicker of regret, I executed a U-turn on the empty highway, tires slipping briefly on the untreated asphalt before finding traction. The journey back to Springfield stretching into what felt like an eternity of swirling doubts and fragmented memories. From the awkward family vacations where Dad's distant gaze always lingered on the horizon to Mom's overzealous church involvement that seemed less about faith and more about atonement. Experiences that had fueled my quiet investigations over the past year, culminating in this holiday ambush that carried the risk of alienating everyone, including Lisa and the kids who deserved better than to witness their aunts and uncles unraveling over pie crust remnants. By the time the house reappeared through the flurry, its windows aglow with the harsh light of all lamps turned on as if to banish shadows, I parked haphazardly and approached the porch where Lisa met me at the door, her face drawn with exhaustion and empathy as she pulled me inside without a word. The living room transformed into a tableau of disarray with the red box overturned on the coffee table, papers strewn like battlefield casualties amid crumpled napkins and forgotten mugs. The children safely tucked upstairs, but their earlier confusion hanging in the air like unspoken questions. Mom paced the Persian rug with wild eyes, the envelope clutched in her fist as she whirled toward me upon entry, demanding in a voice hoarse from crying how I dared to unearth and weaponize such private agonies on this sacred night. Her accusations tumbling out in a torrent that blended fury with desperation, revealing glimpses of the young woman she'd been, scared and cornered into a life of pretense after the salesman's abrupt departure left her facing single motherhood in an unforgiving small town, while Dad emerged from his study at last, his posture defeated as he sank into the recliner and confessed in measured tones that he'd suspected the truth from my birth announcement, choosing silence and fatherhood out of love for the family unit rather than biological ties. A revelation that stunned Tom into immobility on the sofa, his face a mask of betrayal as he processed how this undermined the brotherly bond we'd shared through scraped knees and shared secrets, prompting him to mutter about the unfairness of it all landing on Christmas, when healing should prevail. In the charged standoff, with Lisa hovering protectively near the stairs and the fireplace dying to embers that mirrored the fading illusions, I delivered the culminating stroke of my revenge by pulling out my phone and cueing a voice memo I'd recorded weeks earlier during one of Mom's unsolicited calls, where she'd railed against my loose lifestyle and the shame of my impending single parenthood in tones dripping with moral superiority. Playing it back juxtaposed against the DNA report's stark facts to highlight the hypocrisy that had simmered for decades, the audio's tinny echo filling the room like a spotlight on her double standards. Drawing a choked gasp from her as Tom shook his head in dawning realization, the witty montage not vicious, but pointedly exposing how her judgments had echoed her own buried fears, a clever dismantling that left her collapsing onto the ottoman in sobs while Dad reached tentatively for her hand, their united front fracturing into raw vulnerability. As dawn's first gray light filtered through the frost-laced windows, casting long shadows over the disheveled scene, I gathered my coat and bag, announcing softly that this truth-telling marked the end of my obligatory returns. The baby kicking vigorously as if affirming the boundary, and though Mom extended a trembling arm murmuring an apology laced with pleas for understanding, I stepped out into the crisp morning air, the snow crunching underfoot as I drove away toward an uncertain horizon where Chicago waited with its impersonal bustle, leaving behind a family forever altered yet pondering in the quiet drive whether my vengeful catalyst had paved the way for genuine reconciliation or merely perpetuated the cycle of hidden pains, the envelope's secrets now loose in the world. Like seeds scattered on frozen ground, their growth toward forgiveness or further division an open question that haunted me as the suburbs gave way to open road, wondering if this child would inherit a legacy of honesty or the very deceptions I'd fought to unveil.